Um, okay, hi everyone. Thank you for coming to our cooperative conversions event. It's really lovely to have you here. My name is Corey Reedy. I am the Cooperative Development Director at PACA, Philadelphia Area Cooperative Alliance. We are a nonprofit in Philadelphia which works to support the growth of cooperatives. And cooperatives are businesses which are owned either by their workers or the community who utilizes them. And we work for the growth of them because we see them as a critical vehicle for equitable wealth building and community democratic control. And so there are a couple of different ways cooperatives can form. The two big ways that you might hear us reference today are startup co-ops, where the co-op starts originally with the intention of being a co-op. But then there are also cooperative conversions, where there is a business that is not a cooperative, but then it transitions into being a cooperative. And that's what we're here to talk about today. And so a little bit more of the spiel that you probably read in the promotion blurb, but about 70% of small businesses go unsold and are therefore forced into closure. And in Philadelphia County, 9,556 businesses have ownership that is 55 years and older. So that's 108,000 employees, 5 billion worth of payroll, and 21 billion in revenue. And this is referred to as the Silver Tsunami. So meaning this is our economy and how our economy will be impacted as the older generation moves into retirement. And there is a very important succession strategy to be considered, selling a business to the workers. This is called a cooperative conversion, and it's why we're all here today to learn about cooperative conversions. And whether you're a business owner preparing to retire or an owner searching for a way to retain jobs, develop leadership, and build wealth, employee ownership can help you move your business forward. You can also be a worker here who wants to learn more about the pathway to buy the business from its current owner. And so we're very excited to have with us Ashley Ortiz, and she is going to lead us in this presentation on cooperative conversions. She is the Deputy Director of the Rocky Mountain Employee Ownership Center. She has a background in entrepreneurial business support with a passion for an equitable economy. Her work includes cooperative business development with the Arizmendi Association of Cooperatives in the Bay Area and work as a baker owner at Arizmendi Bakery in San Rafael. Ashley co-founded the LA Co-op Lab, has taught classes about labor, power dynamics, and worker-owned cooperatives, and participated in Start.coop's Business Accelerator program designed to empower entrepreneurs to build transformative, scalable, cooperatively owned businesses. Ashley earned her bachelor's degree in psychology at the University of Colorado and holds an MA in urban sustainability focused on social and economic justice from Antioch University in Los Angeles. And before I hand it over to Ashley, just want to say I just gave the intro. Now we're going to do a presentation, and then there will be about 20 minutes for in-depth Q&A. But as Ashley is presenting, if any of you have a question specifically about the information that's being presented or about how it relates, if people can mute, that would be amazing. Um, so if people have questions directly about the content that's being presented or about a question on how it relates to your situation, please feel free to ask the question while the presentation is happening. You can also put it in the chat if you don't want to unmute yourselves, and we will work to see it and read it aloud for answering, unless it's in depth, and then we'll hold it for the in-depth Q&A at the end. And yeah, now I'll pass it over to you. Ashley, do you have any things you want to say before I start the slides?
Great. Nope. Let's jump into the slides. Just thanks to everybody for being here today. And as Corey mentioned, I feel like I still am learning how to do cooperative conversions. It's just an ongoing learning curve of trying to refine this process and build it and integrate in all the resources. So I'll share with you where we're at today. But again, things are changing, I know, in all of our states with employee ownership support and background and different layers of support from government, from nonprofit lenders, all of that. So yeah, just that caveat that we have our process and continue to fine tune it and do what we can for businesses in Colorado, and we do work statewide across Colorado.
Beautiful. Thank you, Ashley. And I did want to quickly say, Marion, who was listed as doing this presentation with Ashley, had an emergency, is not going to be doing this presentation, but we're very, very grateful to have Ashley here. Okay, I will start the slides. All right, Ashley.
Great. Thank you. And again, as Corey mentioned, feel free to jump in with any clarifying questions as we go, and then we'll have more time to talk about your specific questions and thoughts. So you can go to the next slide. I'll give you just a quick overview about RMEOC. These are our 5 different program areas. We do support conversions to different types of employee ownership, help with the pathway from that initial inquiry moment through the actual conversion. We do have some co-op incubation programs, which is more cooperatives that are starting from scratch, but on a large scale. You might have heard of through the co-op network. The Drivers Co-op in Colorado is a big effort that we're a part of. We do a lot of co-op education, not only for the clients that we're specifically working with, but also just more generally to educate people about the sector, what is employee ownership, things like that. When we are working one-on-one with clients, we do really in-depth technical assistance to help clients and businesses and employees along this pathway. And then we also engage in some research and policy around employee ownership. So today we're going to focus on conversions and why focus on them? What are the benefits of conversions? At the very high level, our hope is that the conversions will help keep jobs and businesses rooted in their communities. And we do a lot of work all across the state in rural communities, in the urban areas as well, but especially in rural communities. You heard some of the statistics that Corey was talking about. We're really trying to identify those businesses that are going to change hands at the best and at worst just close, especially those kinds of businesses that might be really vital for their communities, and are reaching this point of transition in a wave that's really unprecedented in our country. So that's kind of the main high level why we're looking at this, as opposed to starting new businesses. How can we keep those businesses that are there already healthy and thriving, and being run by the people that are already there, that know how to do this work if they're interested and up for that challenge. Within that is this idea of providing retiring owners with a value-aligned exit, right? Again, to that point, the employees are often the people that know the very most about a business, how it is run, have such valuable knowledge about that business. So if that is a group of people that want to potentially buy that business, then that's a fantastic starting point, as opposed to looking outside to a buyer that might come in externally, may make changes that don't connect into that community, and that also may affect the number of jobs, the quality of those jobs, etc. And then once the new business is created, then hopefully we're going to see larger wealth building right across the board. We see that statistically within all employee-owned businesses. And really there's two parts of that, not only the wealth building, but also within most employee-owned companies, employees start to have more decision-making power. And we see that not only benefiting the business itself, but really rippling out into communities, into other aspects of people's lives, right? To learn how to make decisions and feel like your voice matters can have a really profound impact on a broad level. So these are some of the main reasons we are looking to conversions specifically, and why we're seeing a lot of interest in this across the country, from government levels down to local communities, looking at this as a path for these businesses. So a quick overview to ground where RMEOC fits within Colorado for however that much that might translate or offer inspiration for things happening in Pennsylvania or wherever you're calling in from today. So we are one of the few states still that has an actual employee ownership office within a state level government. So our Office of Economic Development and International Trade, you see at the top of that graphic there, OEDIT, they do a whole bunch of different business support programs. They house the SBDC programs, general business support, and employee ownership is now one of the new offices actually within that. And that happened around 6 years ago now. Um, we have a governor who came from employee-owned businesses. At the time, just came in super excited, actually signed his papers to go into office from an employee-owned company, and just really put a lot of backing around that. So we see that as being one of the seeds of the reasons why Colorado has really been leading the way in terms of the amount of support built into the entire state government and the ecosystem here generally. Within that, they created an employee ownership commission, which is also amazing. We meet with them once a month, listen in. They're one of the most active commissions I always hear within the state. So some of them come from employee-owned businesses already. They have that knowledge. Some of them are supporting the conversions or the pathway to employee ownership within their own realm of services, their own communities, but they come together at this state level. And around 2019, some of this funding was available to come to organizations like RMEOC, and we're a separate nonprofit. But some of this funding created, for instance, my position didn't exist before 2019. But the state wanted to have some groups on the ground with technical assistance knowledge to help support the education that they're doing to get business owners into this as both an exit planning and just a good business strategy. So a lot has been happening literally over the last 5, 6 years of things that didn't exist before. RMEOC was actually founded in 2011, so it was around doing advocacy work at a fairly high level, but at a pretty small scale. So we, along with the state, have seen a big growth in what we've been able to do just in these recent years. So as I mentioned, we provide hands-on support to businesses that want to explore employee ownership. We do some help for startups, but the main focus of this state level funding has been for conversions. And a piece of that too is the scale impact, right? Back again to some of Corey's statistics. Our goal is to help as many employees, not only the business, but the number of employees, right? The larger the business, the more employees we can potentially bring in to this better realm of work and greater profit sharing, decision-making control, all of that. So when we talk about employee ownership, for the most part, we're talking about what's called broad-based employee ownership. And I always like to point that out because you might hear about, say, like a small cafe in your town that one or two of the employees buy from an owner, which is technically employee ownership at one scale. But what we're looking at and what you'll hear me talk about from the state level is what we refer to as broad-based, typically three or more workers buying the business. And these are the kind of structures that at least Colorado has really focused on, right? How can we get a larger number of the employees into the mix of ownership? And to do that, we are working specifically with each of those businesses, both the owners and the employees. And we'll go through that whole process here today at an overview level. So worker cooperatives are the main business type we're going to focus on today in terms of conversions, and they are actually their own type of entity. We in Colorado actually have two statutes that govern worker cooperatives. One is a standard worker co-op, And another is called a limited cooperative association. We won't go into the details today, but just to know that this is typically a change in the actual business structure from where a business might be operating. And the employees are the new owners of this entity that takes over. The benefits of worker co-ops are similar to just all the EO conversions with, helping with that job stability, local wealth building. And then an added piece specifically of cooperatives would be leadership development and, again, this real direct ownership of the company. And we're not going to talk too much today about different types of employee ownership, but just to ground that, we think of employee ownership in basically four categories. There are ESOPs, or employee stock ownership plans. It's actually the most common form of employee ownership in the country, but best suited for larger companies. It's fairly complex to set up. It's fantastic when it's the right fit, but it's better suited for larger companies, maybe 20, 30 employees, multi-million dollars of revenue each year. So ESOPs are one avenue. Kind of second down on the list in terms of scale is an EOT, or an employee-owned trust. We're seeing more and more interest and applicability of that type of ownership. And it's similar to an ESOP, but has some differences. But it is a trust essentially that is set up to buy the business on behalf of the employees, and that will hold the new business into the future to maintain its mission and values. Again, still a fairly large legal lift and pathway to get there. So that also is suited to companies that might be 15, 20 or so employees, pretty solid profitability. So that's another bucket that we can look at. For businesses that are smaller, worker cooperatives are a great vehicle, although the thing to remember about worker cooperatives is they do work for any scale. They also can go up to multiple hundreds, if not thousands, of worker owners. So it actually has a broad scope, but that's the third category we're going to focus on. And then Colorado is unique as well. We have what is rare actually to be actually quantified into a area called AES, or alternative equity structures, that the state has built into tax credits for these kind of conversions. And I'll explain more about those tax credits later. But it's essentially pretty standard types of business ownership. You may have heard of like direct share ownership or phantom equity. In Colorado now, we have support for any business that wants to transfer 20% or more of the business's equity into the hands of a larger group of the workers can be considered employee owned and can get support to do that. And that can share a lot of values and similarities with worker cooperatives of how the business is actually run, but it's not going to be a separate entity like a worker co-op. So hopefully that's like the very quick overview of the four buckets that we're looking at. But today we're going to look at this one, specifically worker co-ops. A lot of the process is the same, however, for moving through this process to shared ownership. And one other note I'd like to say just at the top level of this worker co-op direction, as you're thinking through it, is even though we talk about a worker co-op being 100% owned by the workers that are the owners and sharing in that high level decision making, it doesn't mean that all workers in the company have to be owners. So say there's a 10-person restaurant that wants to become a co-op. 5 of the 10 of those could choose to become the founding owners moving forward. And then eventually there's a system set up that could allow the additional 5 or new employees that come in to join into that group of decision making and ownership of the co-op. So I think that's just important to envision. It doesn't have to be everybody that works there. There can still be employees who are not owners. And also when I talk about decision making, I think another piece that helps envision how this would be possible is that we're talking about everybody having an equal voice, an equal vote in what's considered the governance level of the company, not everything day to day. So these kind of co-ops can maintain hierarchy in roles during the day, during general operations, right? You can still have general manager roles or CFO roles, people who oversee other people. Um, but a good way to think about it, I think, is that people then come to the table with kind of two hats. And in one hat, they might be in their day-to-day working role, doing the job that they need to make the company run. But then if they become a worker owner, they're going to also have this other hat to put on that's similar to everybody's, and they come, say, to owner meetings or board meetings if they're on the board of directors to make the higher level governance decisions of that company together with the idea that everybody's input, wherever they're working within the company, has value and should be recognized, also financially. So now let's go into the actual process. Again, we're just going to do a high level overview today, but you can see we generally break it into around these 7 steps. And I'm going to go into each one in more detail as we move through this. So let's go to step one, what we call the health check, the beginning inquiry. So say after today, you're interested, you want to move forward with this kind of direction. We ask that people give us a call. We tend to do an hour free consultation. And so you can go to the next slide. This step one, this is where we will just try to understand the business. If you're the owner, if you're the employees, we learn what we can from your perspective. And we do this intake call, typically with the owner to begin with, to discuss the vision. What is that vision? And this is where we would be trying to figure out of those 4 pathways I mentioned, what is the best fit? You know, what is the size of the company? What's the vision of the owner? When do they want to retire? And also to note here, we don't always do conversions only for exiting owners. We actually have a couple of clients right now in Colorado of business owners that are not at all close to wanting to retire, but they wanted to look to this just to have a better workplace. Basically, they want to have the employees have more investment. They want to hopefully attract different types of workers who will be more invested and retain them for longer if they're able to give them this profit sharing in a co-op. It's called patronage for the long term. Engage them in more decision making, have this education built in. So we can engage with businesses in any of those states really of ownership. It doesn't only have to be exit planning, but that's where we're seeing a lot of the sector focus is on that direction. So at this beginning point, we're looking at the business's financial health, looking at the books, you know, pretty quickly trying to understand are the records in order enough to move forward? If not, you can see we kind of have the no-go thing we're always trying to figure out because we don't want people to spend time on this if we don't see the pieces in place that will allow this to be a successful conversion. So it's not that it wouldn't be possible later in the future, but if financial records need to be more organized or completed to be able to be shared, if the business isn't profitable right now or hasn't been for some time, that's another thing we would talk to you about, try to figure out other things, other resources early on, and maybe talk about returning to employee ownership at a later time. But if all of this is in order, then we would go on to step two.
If I can jump in super
Yeah,
quick
jump in. Go for
just
it.
to say, I mean, Ashley, of course, is incredibly right that most intake calls tend to be with the owner looking to transition into selling their business to the workers. But just in case you or anybody that may watch this recording at any point is a worker that's interested in it, you can talk to orgs like Ashley's and mine, PACA. and we will talk with you about how to proceed forward in engaging in a conversation with the owner to start a health check. Because obviously, as a worker, you probably don't have access to all of this, but you can still reach out to us to talk with us about how to move forward. If you know that the owner is going to sell their business, for instance, and want to make a bid for it. That is all.
Yeah, and I see Maureen's question in the chat. I'll just jump in because I feel like it leads into what you're talking about too. If the do we explore that if certain aspects of the business could be changed to allow it to be profitable? Like, what if an owner was paying themselves a lot more money than the worker owners would pay themselves, things like that. And yes, that's exactly the kind of look that we're trying to go down, the path of assessing the business's financial health, looking at all of that and doing these high level kind of back of napkin sketches at this point. What could be changed? What do we see that could be adapted? Yeah, and trying to see what could be shifted, what's the reality now, and what might that look like in the future. So thanks for bringing that up, Maureen. And then step two, we would move into hopefully getting together what we call a letter of intent. And this would be based on all of that, figuring a lot of these questions, trying to see, can we basically get to a point at which we see a potential path forward for this conversion? And this is a basic document that doesn't have all of the legal details yet, or what the structure is going to look like, etc. But it has this a basic agreement about how is this deal going to be outlined. And Corey, I don't know if you want to add anything from your perspective about how you think of the LOI.
Just that it is also an agreement that you're engaging in an exploratory process together, that no one, particularly if the owner is signing this, like the owner is not going to go looking for outside bids while we're engaging in this process of moving forward to see if this is going to work, selling this to the workers. So it is an agreement that everyone is buckling in for the exploratory process. And but people can of course say like, hey, this is not going to work, and then that process ends. But while the process is happening, we're committing to doing it together. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Ashley, to my?
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, and I think again, this is back to just all of us trying to be as efficient as possible in this early phase with everybody's time, recognizing, the business owner is busy, the workers are busy. How can we continue this path only if we have that understanding that it seems worth investing time and potentially some resources into the next steps. And so step three is then if we have that, that's where we're going to get more in depth into those kinds of questions about what is the value of this company? What would this look like and actually to sell to the employees? What is the owner hoping to get out of that? What is the market value of the business that we can assess as well? And then what do we see as projections looking forward that would make sense for a group of employees to take on, whether they would be looking at getting that capital outside of themselves, right? Their own group. Sometimes people would come together with capital that they already have to buy that, but sometimes they might go look to secure that capital. What is that debt capacity moving forward? And really, from an employee ownership perspective, we're looking at what's the value and the time frame at which those employees who will invest this additional time and energy and expertise, when will they be able to see those profits if there is a loan that has to be taken out to buy that business? So this is a lot of that final figuring again to try to get it down to the actual detail of what that sale price would look like, and at least some idea at this point of where the funding for that would come from. And when I mentioned earlier that we have, worker co-ops as one path, that oftentimes is a situation in which the employees wouldn't have capital coming to the table. There might be a handful, but we can look to help connect them with lenders that would loan to the new cooperative rather than individuals themselves trying to find that capital. When we look at AES directions in Colorado, that's going to have a different path forward in terms of how employees would get the capital to buy that business. So that's another thing we're doing in this kind of feasibility study phase. Are there values to one or the other of those, with this specific group of people, which maybe we want to keep both pathways on the table for a little bit, or maybe one is a very clear direction in terms of what the sale price looks like of the business, and then how those employees can access the capital to actually buy the business. And this is where I mostly connected with Corey in this realm. We'll talk about in a minute. A group called Seed Commons is one of the lenders that is here to help with this transaction. But as we're getting ready to go down a path potentially to engage with outside investors to help the employees with those connections, we're looking at more of these details and the prep of that. So not only from that financing aspect of the transaction, in some cases we do see situations where the owner is willing to be the one to finance the transaction. So they might say, I want 500,000 for this business, and I'm willing to get paid that amount over time to allow for this to happen. So that might be a piece of the puzzle as well. And then we're looking at what's feasible for the employees to actually contribute as a potential buy-in for their ownership share. And at this point, we're helping clients put together whatever materials they might need to connect with lenders, etc. And then right about here is typically where we would connect a business with some outside support. And the two other entities outside of RMEOC that we often connect businesses with would be a CPA, someone who understands the tax implications of this kind of sale for both the owner and the current business and for the employees and the new business moving forward. So we would start to connect on that front, start to have a CPA give some input. And then as the structure prep goes forward, that's typically with an attorney. We have several in Colorado that specifically focus on employee ownership. So that can be really helpful to have someone who's not going to recreate the wheel. But we have more and more people in both of those fields learning about this as interest grows across the country. And as I mentioned, then some of these financing support options, Seed Commons is a group now that RMEOC is actually connected to. We're a peer lender of that network now. And Corey can talk about more what that looks like in Pennsylvania here. But these are the kinds of lenders. There are others that are nonprofits that specifically look to help workers figure out ways to buy businesses. And then just a note too, Seed Commons specifically doesn't only do conversions, they also help potential startups. And then once the business exists, there can be ongoing capital that can come in as support for that business. And again, there's other networks of funders as well. So Corey, do you want to say a few words about that?
Yeah, well, as Ashley was saying, so C Commons, they are a CDFI that loans specifically to worker cooperatives, and they're international. And that is incredibly important because a lot of lenders won't lend to worker co-ops because they don't understand them. And so as we grow, cooperatives, both startups, but also to convert more businesses into cooperatives, we need funding that is co-op specific and friendly and non-extractive, which we can talk with you more about if you're interested in this. But it basically works in the way that Ashley was talking about, that if you if a business moves through this conversion process, not only are we supporting this whole process, all the steps that Ashley's talking about, through our relationship with Seed Commons on supporting this happening, but also in providing financing for a loan because very few workers are going to have the capital to straight up buy the business from the owner. And so we work with Seed Commons to be able to provide that capital to the workers. And then also, while all this is happening, the valuation, the debt, analysis, like while all that is happening, we're also working with the workers to help them figure out how to be a co-op. So it's working on like that multi-prong, like doing the business part of the conversion, but also doing the part of working with the workers to set up their co-op. And then once the loan happens, for the entire time they have the loan with us, we are in a high touch technical assistance relationship with the co-op to support them as they figure out and move forward in being co-ops. Yeah,
Yeah, and
check.
that perfectly leads into the next step here. And that's a really similar process that we have in Colorado as well. So whether we're working with Seed Commons lending or not, we move into this next phase. And this is really where the beginning of the education comes in at a broader scale, right? Of course, education has been happening ever since we started the first meeting, but we're really going to start to engage with the workers at this point and the owner. In a lot of cases, the owner might stay on. Right? It doesn't mean the owner's definitely leaving, but everybody who's going to be part of that new business needs to understand what does ownership mean in this structure? What are my rights? What are my responsibilities? How do I understand more about the company financials potentially so I can be a part of making these high level decisions? And then, as I mentioned, this is typically when engagement with an attorney would be happening, deciding on the actual entity. Like in Colorado, I mentioned we have two different types of worker co-ops. So there's reasons why a company would convert to one or the other, and really helping the owner at that point hone in on the right path that for them, that's where a CPA can play in as well, helping them make a good decision, and then simultaneously working with the employees to make sure that it's a good fit all around and the most strategic path for everybody. And that's what's kind of cool about an employee ownership pathway is that it really it includes everybody, right? Where we're looking at how does this work best for everybody in the whole transaction in the company and moving forward. Then step 6 is continuing with that education. So once the entity is defined, the business knows what it's going to look like. You know, is it a co-op? Is it a phantom stock plan, et cetera? Especially for the cooperatives, though, that are going to be the most connected ownership in terms of day-to-day engagement of the workers owning that company directly. We're going to do a ton of education with those workers. What is governance versus management? What do I need to know about my company's finances? And then systems for communication and decision making and all of those sorts of things. The business would come up with likely bylaws, again, depends on the structure, maybe a new operating agreement. And then we're making the plan around how that ownership will change. What is the owner doing? What gaps might there be in terms of knowledge? Does someone else need to be hired into that role, or are other people going to step into that role? So all of that is this education phase, and this is very fine-tuned at this point, as you can imagine, to that specific company, their industry, the way the company's set up, and what their vision is. And then once that's done and all the legal transaction has been figured and all of that, the conversion does happen at one point. And this is where the CPA, the lawyer, and a team like us often are working together to make sure that conversion goes through and the new owners take a hold of that new business and move forward with the support that they need after that. Because in a lot of ways, it feels like we're getting to an end, but it's actually a beginning of a new journey. So we stay involved, as do other groups like Corey's, to make sure that company is still accessing all of the information. And I can talk more about a really cool tax credit in Colorado that's brand new that's going to help support with that as well. So we, again, are pretty uniquely lucky in Colorado to have multiple layers of support right now coming from state funding. So there are three levels right now of tax credit support, and one is a scholarship, to help with the cost of moving through this. So not only is it a cost for the owner to go through with the conversion, but it's a cost of time and energy, right? So the state has been really backing this from the mission base, like the impact this could really have on the economy for workers, to support this. So we have a high level employee ownership tax credit that covers up to 50% of these conversion costs. And that's all the people that I mentioned. It would cover the tax credit support, or sorry, the tax CPA advice, legal advice, our advice, anything that goes towards this. We also have another thing that we can stack onto that, which is scholarship support. So for the technical assistance work that we do, we can offset, and this is statewide, another 50 to 100% of the costs, and the state covers part of our fee to that business, or in some cases, all of it, based on a sliding scale to further offset those costs. So it's really neat, and we've been seeing the increased interest, as you can imagine, as that help has been coming through. And what's about to come online, January of 2026, is a new tax credit that's called the Strengthen and Thrive credit. And the any of the ongoing costs, up to 50% of those, up to $50,000 annually, will be covered also. And we're just so happy as recognition again of you getting through this conversion and then being at this starting point, to still need support. So I'm happy to talk to anyone about this. I have my email at the end if you want to get more information and or connect you to the state office. So thank you so much for listening. I'm going to pass it to Corey for a little more Pennsylvania specific info, but my email's there, and Corey has contact as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ashley. That was amazing. And we'll have period to talk, of course. Of course, we thought an hour was going to give us tons of time, but I'll work to be really quick. But a case study, and actually the only conversion I know of currently in Philly, although I know that there are going to be more as we continue forward in education, but also just the reality that baby boomers are moving into retirement, and conversions are such a wonderful thing to move into. I know we're going to have more examples of them. But in Philly, we do have a wonderful example of a worker-owned conversion. The the restaurant is now called Taco Taco, but it used to be Honest Tom's. And in 2019, the owner of Honest Tom's sold his business to the workers, because he didn't want to run a restaurant anymore. And he says there's a wonderful article about it. If you just Google Honest Tom's and Taco Taco, it's the only one that will come up. But he's like, the workers were already doing a ton of the work. It made sense to sell it to them rather than someone else. So he sold the business to the workers, and pretty rapidly after that, they just closed the business for a very short amount of time. It was maybe like a month, and then they reopened as Taco Taco, and now they've been going strong. Like they made it through lockdown as a restaurant, and they're going strong. I live really close to them. And I go there whenever I can, and they're very exciting. So if you live in West Philly, go to Taco Taco. But they're a great example that worker-owned conversions can work, and we look forward to seeing more of them. Um, and just really quickly, so some avenues. So we've already talked a lot about PACA, but if you are interested in exploring a conversion, you can reach out to us. I will put my email in this chat, but a lot of you already have it because I sent you an email about this event, but we can work with you on converting your business into a cooperative. If you don't, did I freeze? Hopefully you can still hear me. Okay, all right. So if you don't think that a worker cooperative is the right choice for you, but you are interested in employee ownership options like ESOPs and EOTs, so the stock plan and the trust plan, then we have a great relationship with Pennsylvania Center for Employee Ownership, which we can connect you to, and they can work with you on those. We only do co-ops, but PA CEO does great ESOPs and trust work. Also, we have a wonderful relationship with the Department of Commerce. They actually do considerable funding of PACA so that we can provide pro bono technical assistance to our co-ops, which has been a game changer for us to make sure that co-ops don't have to pay money they don't have to get the support that they need. But also, the Department of Commerce does have programs specifically to help businesses with succession strategies. I know Cheryl is here today, so maybe after our presentation, if she wants to say a few words on the programs in store to help businesses with succession strategies, we'll also email folks with those opportunities if they want. And lastly, I'll say, there was just new legislation introduced. So HB 1751 here in Pennsylvania for an Office of Employee Ownership, introduced by Representative Friel. And that is critical if we want to be able to have all the incredible benefits that Colorado has, such as tax credits, as well as grant funding for this work. Like having an Office of Employee Ownership is going to be really important to as a foundation. So please, you can look it up, HB 1751, but you can also just email your state reps, your state senators, and say that you back this legislation for an Office of Employee Ownership. You can say why co-ops matter to you, because we're really hoping we can get this passed so that Pennsylvania can have as many benefits for conversions as Colorado does. And that's the end. Um, Thank you all for being here. I know we only have 10 minutes, but we are here for questions in this time.
I have a question. That was great, by the way.
Oh, good. Good.
So those tax credits that you were talking, those were state tax credits. Does Pennsylvania have tax credits like that to offset all those costs, or is it?
Not yet, which is why we're really hoping that getting an Office of Employee Ownership can help us move towards getting those tax credits. Because it's hard to start. It's hard to start that kind of advocacy without a center that's devoted to work on that kind of advocacy. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
And
I
as
should
I mentioned,
say,
I think that
oh,
we have this amazing commission that has been just really, really an incredible piece of that. So not only the office itself, but having this group of people that's out in the community, the business community, and with all these different ties, I think has also been really impactful in terms of getting that support. We have attorneys that have been able to be on that commission who also understand it, who have been able to help the state trace out different scenarios and CPAs as well. So just having that body of thinkers, I think from my day-to-day experience, it's really amazing, and they're continually learning, meet monthly, and just really bring a wealth of knowledge and also this energy to keep things moving.
Hi, I have a question. Um, do you guys fund businesses that want to start from scratch? If I wanted to open a business, is there anywhere where we can find funds?
well, we will support you at PACA. Like I know you said that you were in Philly, but we will support you at PACA if you are going to be a cooperative startup business. If you're just going to be a small business, we don't our focus is cooperatives, but the Department of Commerce has a lot of incredible programs. So if you want to start up a business that's not a cooperative, I highly recommend checking out the Department of Commerce website because they have a lot of great programs. And there are other organizations like the Enterprise Center, LA 21, that help businesses that are just general businesses in Philly.
Well, Business Development Center also
Exactly. Yeah.
is
And
another
hi,
incubator. There's a
everybody.
lot of good support for small businesses in Philly, actually.
Yeah, this has been amazing, really exciting work. Um, so Philly Commerce Department is going to be making public a centralized resource center that's going to be a digital resource hub. It's going to have all of the different nonprofits and partners and TA providers and everything in it, much more accessible and easy to navigate than the current setup where everything is on a different page and hard to locate. So the business hub will be probably live in September. Don't hold me to it, September, early October. They were trying to work out the bugs and get all the organizations to claim their own organization and make sure that everything in there is correct. But it will be a centralized resource hub. And at some point in the future, over the next year or so, there will be more educational resources in the hub, in addition to access to various partners. So as Corey mentioned, I'm working as a Fuse executive fellow with the city on developing a succession planning program because folks need a lot of education. This was so great, Ashley, really wonderful presentation and great set of options. And I'm wondering if Colorado has any kind of educational component for business owners to learn about succession and employee ownership before they start this kind of a process.
Yes, and Colorado is doing even more work on that right now, doing a lot of education for the entire exit planning community. And we are working closely with them to make sure that we are there when they get to that point of learning to decide what options there are. Because to your point, there's a lot of learning that they can do that has nothing to do with employee ownership, but that's super important for exit planning from the larger concept. So we're just trying now to tack into that direction to make sure that when they get to the point of looking at options, they are considering employee ownership and knowing that we're there. So that's the more new piece of it, is just that employee ownership is more built out now to know that it's a path to go to. But yeah, absolutely on that front. And also there's a website that I put on the last slide if you go back to the recording. But if you just look up Colorado Employee Ownership Office, there's a wealth of resources on the state website, and one of those is an actual learning platform that we worked through with the state over the past few years. And it's about a 30-minute, pretty in-depth, free starter point too. So I'll have those initial meetings, but I'm always directing people to go through that. And it talks through basically everything I was talking about today at a very quick, high level. It allows you to walk through that and answer questions about your own specific pathway. So that's a really awesome resource that we have to definitely check out and see.
We
Thank you.
will follow up in an email with all the references that we are referencing.
Yeah. And then I did see a question that's a really important one in the chat a little while back about, what challenges do we see owners coming up against when they're looking at this path? And yeah, even with all these resources and all this background, there's so much still that's at play in this. It's a big deal, right? It's especially if an owner has been there for a long time. So I think number one, giving up control is hard, right? That vision of how can anyone else do this when I'm the one that has made all these decisions for so long, and trusting in the employees to get to that place. And that's why we need to, support with all of that education. and bring that knowledge to that team. And then also the financial piece. You know, as you saw, a lot of the beginning phases are the financial piece. That can be hard. They might come to the table with a really unrealistic vision when it's your business, something you've built of what it really might be worth in the market. Or what's possible for the employees moving forward based on trends that we might see that are coming for that business. So really kind of getting to that LOI point is no small feat because so many variables have to come together in terms of where the owner is at, where the employees are coming from, you know, that. And then also from the employee perspective, it's, you know, that also, like, I just always think of it almost as the idea of ownership, right? We all have a different idea of what that means. That might be positive, it might be not positive. You might have all different ideas of what that means and whether that's something you're looking for or not. And oftentimes you might be there and all of a sudden your boss or employer is turning around to say, do you want to take over this business? And that's on both sides. It's just a big idea, a big concept. So that's a lot of the help that we try to provide is to give examples, to connect them with other businesses that have gone through it, you know, hopefully in a similar sector or area, so that they can get the information they need to decide if it's a good path or not, which it's not always the best fit, but sometimes it is.
I know we're at time, but if anybody has one more question, I can stay on for one more question if Ashley is okay for that as well. Okay. Okay. Well, thank you all so much for being here. I know that there's so much more to learn, so much more to dive into, but Ashley, that was a beautiful orientation to this really critical topic because we want to build more democratic ownership and also we want to support. You know, I just keep thinking about the statistic that 70% of small businesses go unsold, and we don't want that to happen because we want to keep small businesses in our cities, in our communities, and selling to the workers is such a wonderful strategy to not only promote democratic ownership, but also to make sure that we don't lose our small businesses within our cities and in our communities. So thank you for this wonderful session, Ashley. We really appreciate learning from you.
Of course.
Thanks
Thanks
very much.
everybody for being here.
All right. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye-bye.
Bye.